Hello, investors and founders. Welcome back to Next Round Ready. I'm your host, Chris. We have special guest Lauren Roberts from Forum Ventures. Lauren, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So let's kind of backtrack a bit. I like to start at the beginning. What got you into the venture capital startup world? How did you get here?
That's a loaded question. It wasn't linear. I broke in 2021. I was going to the University of Oklahoma at the time. I was a sophomore. Thought I wanted to do investment banking like all the other finance kids did. Did like a little program with Citi for investment banking, like an exploratory program. Quickly learned I did not want to do investment banking. I was also
That
very
fast? That's quick.
so quick. It only took me like 2 to 3 months. I was like paired with this first year analyst. Her name was Emily, and we would have like a weekly chat, and she was always having to reschedule on the weekends. She would get pulled into like these crazy deals and things like that. And I was just like, I do not want that for my future. Like, I would love some work-life balance. So I'm glad I realized that early on. But that was sophomore year. And so during that time, I was also doing a lot of public policy work and ended up interning with someone who was doing an internship in VC. And so she was someone I looked up to and I admired. And I decided to, on a whim, apply for a VC internship, even though I had no clue what venture capital was, didn't know how it worked. I just did it. And I got the internship, and summer of 2021, I joined a firm called Atento Capital that's based in Tulsa. Fast forward, a lot of things happened in between now and then, but I fell in love with it. I changed my major when I went back to university for the fall, joined every VC I could find in the Midwest. If you can imagine, there were not that many. So
Yeah.
I worked at as many as I could, get my foot in the door, started my university's first VC club, and ended up going back to Atento in 2023 when I graduated for full time. So I was working there for about 2 years, doing economic development, early stage investing, working on rebuilding Black Wall Street, which was one of the big reasons why I joined. And now I pivoted from Atento to Forum Ventures, which I've been at for about a year now.
I think everybody's journey is always so up and down. There's no one path to getting into venture capital. It's kind of like you just find your space over time from just showing up every day. That's kind of how I see it now from talking to so many investors. There's no one right path. Like, it's not just the MBA or being born into it somehow. It's like you're going to fall into some kind of place essentially.
Yeah, I agree. I will say it was a natural progression. Like, I always like to say that I think no matter what route I took, I think eventually all roads probably would have led me to venture capital eventually. But I was hesitant in a little bit because there's not a lot of representation. It's still growing to this day. Like, there's more women, obviously, but when it comes to Black investors and people who are, on the GP side of things, there's still a lot of lack of representation. So that's kind of been the inspiration for why I'm in it.
I get it. And I do think that the space of like the minorities has to continuously improve. And really, I think the investors and the founders need to get that spotlight more to create the opportunities, the connections, and get the capital flowing. I think the spotlight has to be there for it to even start, the conversation for it to even begin. It's good that you're focused on that too. The women part and the Black part is so important because when I'm looking for investors, that's hard to find sometimes. It's frustrating. It does get to me.
It is. It's very frustrating. And I've always said that I think when you diversify like the capital providers and like the investors, when you see like more diversification there, you're also going to see more diversity in terms of who's getting funded, because I think obviously lived experiences matter. And I think people build things to solve problems that they personally experience. And there are things that minorities and marginalized communities specifically experience that can't be solved unless it's them solving it. So I'm all for that. That's a big thing for me.
And so what's in terms of you as in the VC space, what have you been working on the past year? Like, what was 2025 like for you?
2025 was crazy because the first half of the year, I was leading a pretty big project at my last firm. So Atento Capital is the venture capital arm of a large family foundation in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And so one of the big things there that we worked on was this concept of like placemaking and how do we attract founders to Tulsa and how do we retain them. So that was a big focus area for us. We started out with, thinking about Black founders, and then we also pivoted to Latin American founders. So one of the big tasks that I had before I left was building this pilot program that basically built a bridge between Latin America and Tulsa. So we built this whole program. We partnered with a accelerator based in Argentina called GridX. And we had like this 1 month pilot where we would bring around 10 to 12 founders to Tulsa for a month. We paid for everything. We had a demo day. We invited around 50 or so investors from all around the country to Tulsa to see these companies. And then at the end of the program, we would select a handful to relocate their basically their headquarters and commercial operations to Tulsa, and we would help them with some of the expenses for that. So that was the big thing that I kind of built out or helped build out with our team. We launched the pilot, and then we launched the first official cohort back in March or April. And then come May, I picked up everything in like a 2-week span and moved to New York City.
Wow.
Moved to New York City and started Forum and hit the ground running shortly after that. 2025 was like a year of a lot of changes for me. I think coming into Forum, I had to switch my lens from like a placemaking kind of thing to strictly B2B SaaS. At Forum, we see, upwards of like 60 to 70 companies per year just for our accelerator alone. So I had to go into like this very high velocity mindset, and you have to have a lot of context switching. So I'm seeing a lot of deals, a lot of different industries, a lot of companies on a daily basis now.
I bet it's so different from like the entrepreneurs and who you run into in Tulsa in the Midwest versus New York. That contrast has to be insane.
It is. It's a big difference. I think what's interesting is with such a high velocity firm, you start to see kind of the same things over and over, and you start to get to sense like, dang, I've seen like 10, 15 companies in the last 2 weeks that are trying to solve X problem. And so that kind of like alerts you, and it's like, okay, well, like, why are so many people trying to solve this problem? How big is it? How urgent? Like, it kind of gets your mind racing on, why so many people are building companies in this space. But it also helps with pattern recognition. And so the more companies you see in the same space, you start to see different angles, and you start to see where the winners are versus maybe not.
Okay. So that gives me a couple more questions. I have to quiz you on this, and not quiz, but I think this is where we can kind of talk about what you look for in the founders. Because if it's a bunch of people trying to solve the same problem, what's a way that a founder can stand out?
Great question. So the biggest thing, especially when we're talking about pre-seed, because a lot of these companies are so early, especially for us at Forum, I mean, we look at companies very, very early. We're oftentimes the first institutional check in most of the ones that are coming in on the accelerator sides. I think a founder who can really articulate the problem better than whatever product or whatever that they're building, because the expectation as investors is that you're likely going to pivot. What you started at, when you're coming through an accelerator or even at your pre-seed is going to be vastly different than probably the product or whatever you're solving or whatever you're building when you're like Series A. So as long as you have the North Star of like the problem that you're trying to solve, the product itself doesn't really matter, or the solution at the time doesn't really matter. It's just like, do you really understand the problem, the landscape, the pain point, who's experiencing it? That's really important, I think, at this stage. And then being open to having really fast feedback loops. So I think when I'm speaking with founders, I love when someone's telling me, listen, we initially started as this and we tried X, it failed. Here's why, and this is what we're doing now instead. So just like having that ability to pivot and switch up and change when you're presented with new information is always a really good signal. And then the last part is, I think founder background is really important. Like we really heavily overly index, I think, on the founder, the founding team, their background, because it's really all you have.
Do you mean like the school they went to or their connections?
Not at all. Okay. In fact, I mean, from a industry perspective, I do think we put a little bit too much weight into the school that someone went to. And I think that's when you start to see coastal VCs and things like that, you tend to invest in the same types of people over and over and over. And that's where that lack of diversity comes in. And you put too much weight just because someone went to an Ivy League. So I'm all for not going that route. Obviously, you have some great founders who are coming out of Ivies, but you also have some really great founders who are coming out of state schools too. So I don't think that's where we over-index in terms of when we say founder background. But I think just like, what's your right to win? Like, what's your lived experience? Have you experienced the problem yourself? Or like, what is your tie to this problem that you're trying to solve? Did you work in industry for 20 or so years and you saw that this wasn't being solved, so you want to take it upon yourself? I've seen that a bunch of times where you have people who have that really deep domain expertise and they want to take that and then build a product from that.
That makes sense, because I think if you are going to the same institutions, like you said, you just kind of create this filter where it's like a pipeline, but you ignore a lot of other opportunities that could be out there for your firm if all you do is go to Stanford and the Dukes of the world and MIT. Like, obviously, you're going to find great founders there, but you can never lead around. Like, it's impossible because they already have so many other investors and other angel investors even that are just chomping at the bit trying to get access to them. So it makes sense that you kind of take a more strategic approach to really focus on that diversity. So something else I have to ask you, what's like a red flag with a founder? When you sit there and you get that pitch, what's one of the things that if you hear it, you're immediately like, I'm not interested?
I would say the biggest one, and this one's a little bit more of a recent red flag, but with this surgence of AI, I think a lot of companies are presenting themselves as AI companies when that's not really a moat anymore. Because I think the expectation is that from investors, at least, of course, we expect AI to be a part of what you're building. In fact, we'd probably be concerned if it wasn't, but you can't lead with AI as the product because that's embedded in everything. Being able to articulate what the product is, how you're leveraging AI, is it AI native versus you're just, using some like integrations and MCPs and things like that. Like, how are you actually using AI in your product? You can't just say AI is the product, right? So I think that's the biggest one that I've seen is like people aren't able to articulate kind of the AI component of the business. And then I think the second part is when founders are, defensive. I think when you ask probing questions or maybe you push back on a few things, I think founders who are defensive can be a red flag because it may indicate that, they might not be receptive to feedback. And in addition to that, if they're defensive now when you're asking questions, how are they going to react when customers do the same thing? So that's something that we think about.
And I like the AI part that you mentioned because I think a lot of founders fell into the AI trap where they just mention it in their pitches because all the other AI companies are getting a lot of the funding. So they read the TechCrunch headlines and they see, man, they got 20 million, 50 million, all kind of crazy numbers. So then if I'm going into my pitch the next day after reading that, it's like, well, we got to say we AI because all the AI companies are getting the funding. I think that's part of why founders are falling into that trap.
Exactly. So we've seen it a lot, I think, at Forum. I definitely saw it a lot when, ChatGPT and things like that were on the rise a few years ago at my last firm. I mean, every company was like, we are an AI company and XYZ, right? But they weren't able to necessarily articulate it. And so I think that's why, one of the big things that we really like from a industry or vertical standpoint is like verticalized AI versus like horizontal AI. So like tools that are using AI to embed really deeply into specific industries and their workflows versus like AI tools that can be used by anyone, but they don't really have like a wedge within a certain workflow or anything like that.
Yeah. And for everybody out there listening, kind of what she means when she says vertical is you're creating some kind of AI solution that focuses on one specific problem for a specific person. So like the AI out there, I saw one recently where it was like for accounting software, helping accountants with like the spreadsheets and managing the numbers and all of that stuff. I saw another one where they were like helping review the tax laws. Incredible. So that's what vertical is, where it's more just niching down. It's the same thing we've been saying for years, honestly.
Yep, it is. Just a different terminology for it.
Slightly different. But I think that ties into what you said earlier about the way to stand out is knowing exactly like how you do this thing differently. And I try to preach that to founders myself. Like, find your thing that's an actual moat, because I would argue that distribution is a bigger advantage than AI, because if you can
Absolutely.
reach actual customers, I think that's a really big differentiator.
Absolutely. I actually just had a conversation with a founder about this, like literally probably an hour or two ago, but just talking about, their distribution channels and their strategy for that, because I think if you can really craft an intentional strategy around distribution, then you have a really unique right to win compared to a lot of people who maybe aren't focused on the distribution piece of what they're building.
Yes. Yeah. And my sermon is always podcasting, because I know how much it's helped me just connect with quite literally anybody. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not supposed to know these people. They will have no idea I exist outside of the podcast. So me having the show just gives me a leverage that I think certain industries it would be harder, obviously, but like B2B SaaS, all of these
Yep.
AI tools, it's a layup. You can interview your customers, you can interview your competitors. Like that's how easy it can work. And I've done it before, which is it's hilarious how easy it works when you actually sit down and execute it. So what are some of the industries that you focus on in your firm now?
Yeah, that's a great question because we don't necessarily have an industry focus. Really, our big thing is B2B SaaS as a business model, but that obviously can mean everything.
Yeah.
I'd say the four as a firm, I'll touch on the four that we have as a firm and then maybe some that I'm like specifically interested in, I've been leaning into. But healthcare slash health tech mostly, not biotech or life sciences really. It's there, but it's really specifically health tech, I'd say, is a big one. I would say supply chain and logistics is one. Cybersecurity is the third. And then the fourth one is a little bit new. It's something we're still trying to build out, but we just added a new partner to the firm to help us build this out, and that's frontier tech and defense tech. So it's interesting because historically speaking, we haven't been a firm that invests in hardware. Now, have we invested in hardware before? Yes. Is it often that we do? No. Now with frontier tech, defense tech, we're looking at dual use cases. We're looking at companies who have maybe the hardware component, but then also the software component that kind of feeds into it. So we're trying to build out that thesis right now, but it's a little bit new. But we have done a few more deals in that space specifically. I'd say for me, my big one, I've been really into AI infrastructure. So thinking through all of the things that need to be true in order for us to support this surge in AI, data center, compute, thinking through capacity, all of those things, the infrastructure, that's like kind of going to be the one to support AI and large language models and things like that. I've been really into that. And then I'd say another one is women's healthcare is always one that I've loved. I know we focus a lot on reproductive health, but I've seen a lot more that's focused on aging population and some of these big inflection points that we're seeing on the demographic side. So those are probably the two that I've leaned into, in addition to cybersecurity as well.
Cybersecurity is huge right now. I think because AI is so scary to everybody, it's like I think the cyber part of it, of what's happening in the next 5 to 10 years, is going to continue to blow up. Um,
Yeah.
and I think women's healthcare is becoming bigger too. I've had some founders on who are making like just incredible products. Like one woman is working on like a certain type of bra that like
Interesting.
it's for it's like a super versatile bra, but it has like the AI technology as part of it. And she's like an engineer, biologist, all kind of stuff. So she got some skills. And like when she explained
Yeah.
to me, I was like, wow, that's actually incredible. Like it's something you don't think about, but she's solving a really good problem. So I can see why you would be deep into that space, because that's where you're going to find a lot of different, really like off the wall kind of companies that most people haven't thought of. That hardware is hard, but when it's done right, I think it's like world changing.
I agree. And I know there's like mixed feelings on consumer, and it can be very hard to fundraise in the space, but I do love consumer, especially when it
Yeah.
comes to I love consumer. I love investing in it. I think it's very interesting. It's something that we don't really touch at Forum, but it's something I do keep track of, and especially in the women's space. I mean, if you look at in terms of household spend and even just overall GDP, women are typically the drivers in terms of who's the one who's actually spending the money in the household.
Yes. So it makes no sense to not look at it. Like you have to prioritize it because, like you said, women are just so big in terms of spending. And I think,
Yeah.
not to go off on a tangent, but I do think the way the world and the economy is going with more women choosing to not be in relationships, the
Yep.
continue is only going to, like, it's going to rise. They're going to like spend even more. So
Yeah.
selling to that market is just a genius idea, honestly.
Yeah, I agree. I think when I think of just like building out a thesis, a lot of what kind of informs my interests has to do with things like that. You know, like for example, we have the aging population. That report came out, and obviously with the aging population, from that you have the wealth transfer, and we have this huge transfer of wealth that's going to be happening. What are the companies and things like that that could come from that? But then even shifts with women in terms of getting married later, choosing to have children later, choosing to work, choosing to be educated. All of those things kind of lead into other areas that make for really great investment opportunities.
Yes, yes. See, you get it. You get it. Okay. I always ask my investors before our conversations end, what's one piece of advice you would love to give to a founder before they go and pitch?
Ooh, that is a good question. I think the biggest thing that I would tell them to do is that focus on the problem. I think that's probably the biggest one. I feel like sometimes it can be really easy to jump into the solution or jump into the product, which makes sense, obviously. But I think really in that beginning part, really setting the scene, really giving a lay of the land on, this is the problem that exists. This is who's experiencing it. This is why it matters. And this is why I'm tasked to solve this now. I think the now piece is also very important. So really just giving that nice framing as to, why you're building what you're building, why this matters is super helpful. And it's something that I really like when founders do that, especially if a founder is able to maybe incorporate a personal story or, their personal interaction with that specific problem. It really helps a lot because then the solution and the product and what you're building, it makes sense.
Focus on the problem. That's a good one. That's the first time. Well, that's the first time I've heard it put like that. Because I do think a lot of founders get really feature happy and it's like, this is
Yes.
what our product does here and it does this there and it does that there. And it doesn't really say this is why this problem is important now, how many people are dealing with this problem, what this problem is costing people in terms of time and money, like that overall impact. I think the better you can describe that, then you build more of, I would say, understanding too, because then you as an investor look at them like, oh, you actually did your research. You know this, like you are aware of what's going on, and putting that kind of knowledge on display. I think that can work really well.
I agree. And I think too, the why now piece is so important because you could have a problem that's existed for a million years, but if there isn't like an urgency or something driving it in which people are going to now take advantage of it, now buy it, whatever, put money towards it, it doesn't really matter. So, we've seen problems that have been always been a thing, but now there are some maybe regulatory tailwinds or just some things that are just starting to happen now where a company coming into the space can really have a right to win because now there's like actual demand for whatever they're building.
Exactly. Exactly. See, you get it. See, guys, this is why I love having smart investors on like this who can give you that real insight, that real perspective. Lauren, thank you so much for being here and being such a great guest. Are you open to founders reaching out to you?
Absolutely. I would love nothing more for founders to reach out. So, yeah, I'm available via email and LinkedIn as well.
Right.